Welcome to the Animal Training Academy podcast show. I'm your host, Ryan Cartledge. I know that you're here because you want to master your animal training skills using a force-free approach. And to handle the variety of challenges you face, you need a broad knowledge and experience base. The problem is, we all get stuck and hit rough patches in our training, which can leave us feeling overwhelmed and helpless. Our mission since 2015 is to empower trainers just like you. The Animal Training Academy has helped thousands of trainers globally to develop skills, gain confidence, and positively influence both animal and human learners. Here's how we can do the same for you. Sign up for our membership waitlist at www.atamember.com. Register when our doors open email arrives and start growing your training skills. Build impactful training practices benefiting you and those you train. So join the waitlist at www.atamember.com. And while waiting, enjoy this free podcast show. We want to see you avoid embarrassment, overwhelm, and burnout. Instead, we want to see you build resilience to setbacks, get more organized, and grow your training skills and knowledge. In short, we want to see you enjoy confidence in yourself as a trainer and lead a fulfilling life, positively impacting the lives of the animal and human learners you work with. But we will start today's episode where I'm very excited to continue my conversation with Nicky Plaskitt. If you haven't listened to the first part of our conversation, you can find it in the previous episode on whatever app you are listening to this show on. In that episode, we explored Nicky's journey in getting started with working with animals, positive reinforcement training, and what led her to her current role as a zoological behavior consultant. It's definitely worth a listen. However, if you haven't listened to it yet, you are, of course, welcome to start here with part 2, where you'll still gain plenty of insights to help you grow your skills, knowledge, and confidence in animal training. Let's dive in. Nicky has worked in the field of animal care since 2000, working with a vast array of species in several well-known zoological collections. Nicky has worked as an animal keeper, presenter, trainer, and a team leader in this time. Her last UK zoo position involved revolutionising the care and management of a large number of free-flight birds using science-based positive reinforcement training. In 2021, Nicky set up her own business and now works as a zoological behaviour consultant across the UK and overseas for shaping behaviour. The goal of this business is to improve animal welfare through empowering animal caregivers with knowledge to boost their skills. Nicky has been a member of IATA since 2012 and joined the board of directors in 2022, recently organising the first ever UK symposium to further bird welfare in the UK and Europe. She is a certified professional bird trainer and animal trainer through the IATCB and sits on their board of directors also. So without further ado, it's my very great pleasure to welcome Nicky back to the show today. Nicky, thank you so much for taking more time to come and hang out with us at Animal Training Academy.
Hi, Ryan. Thanks for having me back on. It's great to be here to talk to you again.
I'm excited. I'm excited to explore a topic that really lies at the foundation of what we do at Animal Training Academy and you do with your business, developing the confidence of animal trainers. I often hear trainers, Nicky, express doubts about feeling competent enough to take on clients, speak at conferences, or tackle their very individual and unique training challenges that they face in their zoos or with the domestic species they work with. A common term that I hear in these discussions is impostor syndrome. Perhaps these trainers observe others seemingly achieving training goals with ease while they struggle with similar tasks. Or maybe they're assisting clients with, for example, if you're working with dogs, barking issues, yet they go home and they face similar challenges with their own dogs. Challenges like these can be really stressful, sometimes embarrassing, and certainly frustrating. And we, of course, don't want our listeners to feel this way. Our aim is to help them grow their confidence as trainers. But the question is how? It sounds easy to sit here and say that, but practically, how do we achieve this? Nicky, based on your experience, what strategies have you found effective? In what ways can we nurture and develop greater self-confidence in our roles as trainers during, first time I might be saying this on the podcast, 2024?
Hey, Ryan. Well, first of all, let me tell you that imposter syndrome is real, okay? I think we all suffer from imposter syndrome because actually, why wouldn't we? You know, we're out there, we're putting ourselves and our skill sets out there for other people to see and to judge. And if you don't get results straight away, which as positive reinforcement trainers, like we know that things take time, right? Training is a process. It's something which happens. It doesn't happen in one session. Certainly not your entire goal behavior, not if you're observing your animal's body language and acting and reacting to it appropriately. So sometimes people will say things like, but why is it taking you so long to get that result? Well, because I'm going at the animal's pace. I'm moving at a pace that the animal is comfortable with. And I think we as trainers need to get comfortable with saying that as our answer, you know, like trust your own skills and your own observation skills. Like that's like, I cannot rate developing your observation skills highly enough, because whatever animal or species that you are working with, they are communicating with you or with the other humans in their life all the time using their body language. And as humans, we are not always programmed to see it, and certainly not to understand it and react to it. So if you as the trainer can really hone your skills of observing, describing, and reacting appropriately to the body language, then you are truly doing the best that you can for that animal, because you are working with an animal that is communicating with you its comfort level and you're responding appropriately. So if I'm working with an animal, it doesn't matter what species it is. If it's a species that I haven't worked with before, then actually I'm probably not going to be the one doing the training. If it's an individual that I haven't worked with before, again, I probably am not the best person to be doing that training, because I don't know that animal as well as its primary caregiver does. So my job nowadays as a consultant is most of the time to coach the humans who know that individual animal or know that species the best, and ideally the species and the individual animal. And I'm coaching them through, and I'm relying on them to tell me, oh, when the animal does this, I think I've maybe gone too far. Obviously, there's some things that I will see as well, particularly if it's animals that I'm familiar with. But I think having the confidence in your reading body language ability is huge. And that's something which we can all develop, we can all get better at all the time. Sometimes just sitting and watching an animal, not trying to do any training, not trying to do any kind of a behavioral intervention at all, but just watching an animal in its environment, whether that's a home, whether it's a sanctuary, a zoo, a rescue centre, whatever it is that you're working with, just sit and take some time to watch that animal. If its behaviour changes because you're present, set up a video camera and watch the footage and see what you notice about that animal's body language. I think acknowledging body language, obviously we never know what our animals are thinking, but we can tell a lot by the way that they move their body, the way that they posture, the way that they change their position, if they're looking towards you, if they're looking away from you, you know. And I think that learning how to the language of the species you're working with really can't be undervalued. I think it's so important. And that way you're able to say, oh, do you know what? It's taken me this amount of time because I'm confident that I'm moving at a pace that the animal is comfortable with. And when you have those breakthrough moments and the light bulb moment, you know, where your animal understands what it is that you're asking them to do and is confident to do it without, you know, any sort of emotions around making mistakes, I think that is even more rewarding because you have worked so closely with this animal at that time. So for me, I think body language is huge, and that is very, very key. The other advice I'd give you is make it as easy as possible for your learner to be successful, whether that is an animal or a human learner, whoever it is that you're working with. As the trainer, you're the one who sets up the environment for that animal, that learner, to be successful. And for me, if I'm whatever species I'm working with, success looks like access to reinforcers. Okay, that's how I view it. A successful learner is one that has access to reinforcers quickly, and a choice of reinforcers in an ideal world, and remember that our learner gets to choose what is reinforcing. They're the ones who decide what it is that actually they're going to work for. So if you can set up your environment so that the animal can get it right, be successful as quickly as possible, and have access to a choice of reinforcers, you're not only building your relationship with that animal, you're building your body language observation skills, and you are taking steps towards your training goal.
Thinking about the listeners of the show, Nicky, who are mainly intermediate to advanced training skills. We have some beginners who listen to the show. Shout out to you beginners. So grateful you're here. You're in the right place. But for our intermediate and advanced trainers, a lot of the time we're teaching this stuff to those beginner trainers. We're teaching this stuff to a team of zookeepers. We're teaching that to our clients if we're working with domestic animals. And you said there, success looks like access to reinforcers. And that's been something that's really on my mind recently when thinking about teaching observation skills. So if we have an animal who is demonstrating body language that might mean they're not super comfortable with the situation, and there's some universal behaviors that I think animals demonstrate, like proximity seeking behavior, that we can form hypotheses on, that proximity is reinforcing whatever reason that's for. And then if we're teaching positive reinforcement trainers, I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on this, and if you intentionally teach around this. When we're teaching young trainers, that they're kind of got to wrap their head around, okay, so there's behavior, and then I've got to reinforce that behavior, and I've got to cue that behavior, and they're trying to do all of this stuff. And then they're trying to, as well, read the body language of the animal. And success looks like access to reinforcers. And then so for you, right, as a trainer, if you can work with a new animal, a new species, or just a new individual of a species you've worked with lots of before, and they show that they're seeking proximity, and you're like, I'm going to help you get that because I can see you're uncomfortable. For new trainers, they might be like, oh, that didn't work very well because what I want is the animal to do what I want because I'm training and I've learned this. And there's a challenging gap, I think, for teaching this information where the learner, the human learner, their reinforcer might be the animal doing whatever behavior they're trying to train, right? But that is contradictory to maybe how we would say success looks like access to reinforcers, because we're like, oh, maybe this animal is uncomfortable here. So you need to allow it space, that reinforcer. So I'm just curious on your thoughts on how you kind of help new trainers bridge that gap. And if you have any specific thoughts on that. I'm not going to change that question. It is just one question. Does that make sense, that question?
Yeah, I think so. So let me see if I can take a stab at answering it for you. Okay, so I think that what you're saying, if I'm right, is that for new trainers in particular, they might be reinforced by the animal approaching them and the animal doing the behavior that they want to get from the animal. But the animal might be showing us body language that says they're not necessarily 100% comfortable with the proximity of the trainer. Okay. And we have to balance the line there between the trainer still feeling successful and the animal feeling successful. Yeah. So I think what I tend to teach is that, like I said earlier, that we always try and move at the animal's pace. I also try and teach people that when we're training, it's really important, if we can, to take our ego out of the room. Okay, because when we're training any behavior, whether it's for husbandry, for veterinary care, medical procedures, whether it's, for ambassador programs, whatever it is, everything that we're doing should be to improve the welfare of the animal that we're working with. Okay, so that should be our end goal. No matter what steps it is that we're trying to get to, whatever our the specific procedure goal is, the goal of the whole process should be to be improving the animal's welfare. And I think if we separate ourselves and how we feel about the session that's going on and try to look at what the animal is communicating to us, I think that helps people to recognize when they need perhaps to take a step back or to regroup or to go and ask for help. I always recommend that people video their training sessions, because quite often we see things when we look back at those videos that we didn't notice in the moment. And sometimes you might have missed something. Your animal might have communicated that it wasn't comfortable and you didn't see it and carried on. And then at some point the behavior breaks down and you're not really sure why. And if you go back and look at that video, you can see, I missed that. I missed that sign right there, which obviously gets easier to do the more we do it, the more sessions that we video, the more sessions we watch. And if you can't see it, ask one of your peers to have a look and help you. We're supposed to be a really supportive community of animal trainers, particularly Animal Training Academy. I know all the members out there are talking to each other and meeting up and doing all these really cool things. So, talk to other people and get them to help you in a safe way to give you some feedback. For me, I think if we learn that it isn't about us, it should be about our animal, and we can separate the way that we feel and almost teach ourselves that what should be reinforcing is the fact that we're building a relationship with our animal, and we might be taking a step back during that training session, but that is giving the animal control over how close you get to them. Control's a primary reinforcer, right? So that's super reinforcing for the animal. And it builds the trust between the two of you, which, we can't do anything without trust, right? If our animals don't trust us, where on earth do we start from that point? So I think as you also, definition of reinforcement is that behavior increases or maintains, right? So if we do take a step back and then the animal continues to engage with us, that tells us that actually that animal is now more comfortable. We've taken a little step back. I'm saying step back, that could be metaphorical or physical. Whatever it is that we're doing in our training session, if we reduce our approximation, reduce our criteria to a level that the animal is comfortable with, if that animal continues to interact with us at that reduced criteria, then that builds our trust with that animal and should reinforce us. Obviously, everybody's different. Everybody gets reinforced by different things. But if we separate out, or try to, our ego, I quite often, when I teach in a classroom, I frequently tell people that just because I've worked with this animal, or just because I've trained this behavior this many times, it doesn't mean that I'm the right person to train that behavior for that individual animal if I don't have the best relationship with that animal. So, I have to always look at my relationship. What's my past history with that animal? Does that animal even know me? Does it know me, but I had to do something aversive the last time I interacted with it, therefore it's wary of me? Is there somebody else they might not have as much experience training that behavior. They might not have as much experience training at all, but they've got a really solid relationship with that animal. And if I focus on my ego, I push them to one side and I say, no, I'm going to do this and I'm not going to be successful, right? Nor's the animal, most importantly. Whereas if I say, hey, my ego is not important, what is important is the animal and how the animal is reacting in this situation. And this animal has got a great relationship with you over here. You're going to be the person who's going to train this behavior. And then I get to coach that person through, which is reinforcing for me because I see that person succeed as well. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I've certainly waffled. So hopefully that covers most of what you're asking.
Yeah, well, it's generated lots of thoughts for me. Going back to the first ones I was thinking about when you started answering your question was success looks like access to reinforcers. So for your individual human learner, if you're teaching beginner trainers or if you're teaching clients, success looks like, or that the reinforcer for the client is the thing that we need to teach. What you're saying is your reinforcer is that the animal has control, and hopefully when we offer them that, which needs unpacking in terms of what that looks like. Let's say they're asking, they're demonstrating body language which shows they are uncomfortable, so we give them space and an opportunity if they want to approach again. They will get reinforced by building trust. The animal knows that you are someone that it can trust to provide access to reinforcers, whatever that looks like: control, safety, food, toys, access to human, that they have good relationships with, whatever that is. That we're saying to new trainers when we're teaching, that is the reinforcer you want. And we're everyone, human learners different, obviously, right? And we have this life, like decades of learning history of maybe success is something else. Like this is very unwell thought out thoughts, Nicky, and everyone listening. Is maybe a specific kind of mindset. We're trying to teach a specific kind of mindset in terms of, if you have been alive for 25 years and for you success looks like you have set a shaping plan and a training plan to achieve a certain thing and to feel successful, to get your reinforcers, your lifetime's learning history says that your animal needs to move in that direction. And if it doesn't, then you're not accessing reinforcers, you're not getting success. But you might be learning, and that's kind of where the mindset thing comes in, I think. And then you're saying, and it makes total sense, to remove the ego from that. Do those two things, to me they do, to you, kind of where how I'm thinking about it, and the words I'm using to describe, I think the same thing. Does the mindset of how a human has been reinforced throughout their life tie in with this idea of ego and the challenge of teaching someone new? Ignore your reinforcers from your life and get this new reinforcer, and that's where we're kind of saying remove your ego. Not well thought out, everyone. Thank you for sticking with us. Over to you, Nicky.
Oh, goodness. Okay, I mean, I think that we are saying the same thing. Yours actually sounded more eloquent than mine did in my head, so I'm hoping
Wow,
that
it didn't sound eloquent to me as I was saying.
The listeners can piece it together from the two of us. I mean, I suppose, like, as humans, I would say we don't really live in a very reinforcing society at all. We live in a punishing society, right? You know, so much of our the way that we learn things as we're growing up, not intentionally, but, the way that we're taught when we're young, when we're at school, when we first start to drive, when we first go into our first job, there's a lot of punishing consequences. And humans in general are taught, do this to avoid that. Like, people have jobs so that they can pay their bills, so that they don't have to, live in a substandard accommodation or on the street. We work to avoid aversive consequences rather than striving to achieve the desirable ones. Like, I think the vast majority of the human population are probably sitting in that circle, if not all of us, certainly at times in our lives. And so I think if you are doing what we do and you're talking to new trainers, if we remember that positive reinforcement works for all species, right? That includes humans. I think a lot of the time when we first start working with new trainers, they don't really have very much experience of being reinforced for things that they've done. They do things to avoid being told off. They go to work they turn up on time to avoid being docked 15 minutes pay or whatever it is, rather than, hey, you're here 10 minutes early. That's amazing. Thank you so much. And actually, I think if we start remembering to use positive reinforcement with the people that we are training, they will start to live in that more reinforcing society, even if it is just in the circle of animal trainers. But still, that's a start. Then I think we can reinforce those new trainers with the way that we teach them and the way that we react to them. And they can come to us and say, this happened in my training session and the animal was showing me it wasn't very comfortable. So I took a step back, but now I feel like I failed. And we can congratulate them for acknowledging that animal's body language and say, hey, you did a great thing. Like, let's sit and watch that video back together because you noticed exactly the moment that that animal communicated something to you and you reacted. That's brilliant. And so we can train our learners, our human learners, to retrain their brain, basically, to take their ego out of it and to redefine the way that they see success, because they might not have been in that reinforcing scenario for very long. I think that's hopefully sort of summarized both of our thought processes there.
Yeah, I really like that. I'm grateful that you brought that up. So it's, for me, if you're teaching a new trainer and they persist at something and they get success, the reinforcer might be the removal of the pressure to achieve something, especially in front of their peers or in front of their colleague, and that's gonna feel very different than if the reinforcer is, I think, learning. And so, as listeners of this show, if you're a beginner, you might be like, what the heck are these people talking about? But for our and apologies for that, because that's on us to describe things better. So apologies if this has got confusing. But for our intermediate and advanced trainers who are teaching others, what I've taken away from what you've said is to really emphasize, well, obviously when they do something right, intentionally point out specifically what they've done. Video is great for that, but also to frame what we're working towards consistently, because I think we have to be aware that our learners might reach what we label as success, and we might say they did the thing and I taught them to do it, but they might be negatively reinforced for doing so, and therefore a lot of that learning might not feel good.
If we can try to create a safe space, where it's okay for people to make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. We all do. Nobody's perfect, right? So if you make a safe space so that people are comfortable to say, I don't think I did this as well as I could have done. Can you help me see what I could do better? And they are open to have that conversation because you've created an environment where the consequences are reinforcing for communicating with you, just like we do with our animals. Like if an animal shows us it's not comfortable, we go, oh, what can I do differently? Because we need to do that with our people, with our human learners as well. So I think a lot of this falls on the trainer that's teaching people rather than on the learner themselves, because we don't put it on our animals and say, well, they're not comfortable right now and they should be, so that's on them. We put it on ourselves for, how can I change this? How can I allow that animal the comfort to continue participating in this training session? And if we approach our human learners in the same way, it's not pleasant if you've got people who don't want to be around you and don't want to work with you and don't feel safe around you. And I mean, in episode 1, we talked about the fact that I was a team leader and I ran a team for 9 years, and I learned a lot in that time. When I started out, I made a lot of mistakes, and I definitely did not create a safe space for some of my team members around me. And I would like to think that over the years, I learned how to be better at that. And hopefully, by the time that I left and now going into the business, I think that I do a better job of that. I'm still learning, because we all are, and I will make mistakes because we all do. But as the trainer, I think that should be on me for how I change the way that I approach my learner, rather than on the learner to try and find a way to please me, if that makes sense. And again, I do apologize, as Ryan did, for anybody who's a little bit lost by this conversation. I think we've kind of gone slightly all around the houses. It's a lot of fun, but I hope we haven't lost anybody, and I hope everybody can sort of gather what it is that we're trying to say, and if not, then that's on us, not on you.
Well, I think it's part of the confidence of being a trainer when you've gained years of experience and you've invested your resources, time, money into building your skill and building your knowledge, and then maybe you're 5 years into it, 10 years into it, but you still have imposter syndrome, and you're thinking, why does it feel like this? And part of I think the confidence equation and access to your reinforcers as a disseminator of information, because whether you're doing presentations in a college or whether you're talking to clients in their home setting, your job is to set that learner up for success, set those learners up for success. And I think you've really hit the nail on the head there, Nicky, and thank you again for connecting that dot for this podcast episode, and that is creating a safe space. I'm really interested in learning about what you learned in your role as a team leader. And we in episode 1 talked about community and IATA. Community is the backbone of Animal Training Academy, and the number one thing our members love about our membership is the safe space that we've created in our community that is an antecedent for good learning to occur. How do we build safety, whether it's with, and I think answering this question will help build confidence for the listeners of the show. How do we build safety for a team or for clients that we're working with one-on-one? Because even in that space, status is important. It's vulnerable to show your errors for a lot of people, but to really help those clients and to feel confident ourselves that we're doing that authentically and effectively, I agree wholeheartedly. Safety is paramount. So curious on your thoughts. You willing to share what you learned as a team leader? That would be amazing. But how do we build safety?
I mean, I learned a lot of things as a team leader, and I learned them because I did things wrong. So I didn't learn them in a safe space, put it that way. But I think what I learned was that our positive reinforcement techniques work for all species, and that body language and reading and respecting body language, again, with all species, are really important tools to have. And as humans, I suppose at times some of us are intuitive to, we can look at a person who's got their head down, got their eyes averted, they're all closed off and scrunched up, and they don't really look like they want to be a part of the conversation that's happening. Now, there's different ways that we could approach that. We could call them out on it in front of everybody, which is probably not going to be very reinforcing for them and potentially could make them withdraw even further. Or we could find another moment to catch them and say, hey, is everything okay? And I think sometimes just asking that question, is everything okay, can allow a person to open up. Of course, sometimes they don't. They say, yes, it's fine, and walk away from you, which means maybe you haven't done enough work to build trust with that person because they don't feel that they're comfortable to talk to you. I think something that I learned as a team leader was to not react straight away to things, which can be difficult to do when you're running a team. You're responsible for staff welfare, you're responsible for animal welfare, particularly if you're doing a show or an interactive experience. You might have public as well, and public perception of events unfolding sometimes puts quite a lot of pressure on us, and we don't always handle that well. I know I certainly have not always handled that very well, and if things go wrong, sometimes even if I haven't reacted out loud, you can see it all over my face because my face says all of the things that my mouth doesn't. But I think learning to sort of take a moment and, like, you know, if it was a training session with an animal and something goes wrong, then, you know, if the animal isn't in danger and a person isn't in danger, then sometimes the best thing that you can do is just take a second to regroup and go, oh, that is not the outcome I expected from that. Let me process what just happened and how can I approach this better. And when we apply those techniques to people and the learners that we're working with, the team members that we've got, then we can react in a more appropriate way. Now, that's not to say that when mistakes are made, they go unspoken. You know, I mean, obviously, we all make mistakes. That is definitely a thing. But if we want people to feel safe to say, I think I didn't do this very well, can you help me with it? Then we need to teach them that when they make mistakes, there's a way forward for that. You know, like, okay, so this didn't go the way that we wanted it. Is there anything that I can do to help you remember to turn the hose off at the penguin pool? I mean, you know, like, having worked with penguins for a very long time, you know, you'd be topping up the pool, your radio would go, you'd disappear off to do something else. 3 hours later, the entire enclosure is flooded. And, you know, I've definitely done that. One of my colleagues, who shall remain nameless for the purposes of this podcast, used to do it on a very regular basis. And, you know, we came up with a strategy where we made a stick-on Velcro sign. And when you turned the nozzle to say that the pool was on, you stuck the Velcro up that said pool is on, so that as you left the building, it was on the door in front of you. You couldn't miss it. And that really helped that person to be able to go, I've got to go back and turn off that pool, because as they were leaving, they noticed that the sign said it was still on. But it took us a little while to figure out that that was a good system. And, you know, we went through lots of different alleyways. One of them would just be taking a video of you walking through the flood and sending it on the group chat, you know, which this person reacted very well to. But for some team members, that could be really uncomfortable. So you need to know the people that you're working with and know the people that you're teaching. And if you're working with a new client, you don't know those things yet. So I think relationship building is really key. And the way that I like to build relationships with people is to listen to them and to try not to be judgmental in my responses. You know, they might tell me that they'd seen this great YouTube video that told them to do XYZ with their dog or their parrot, and it's completely the opposite advice that I would give them. But they don't know that at that point, and they have done the best that they knew how to do, which was Google information. And unfortunately, the most played video on their subject happened to be one that had training techniques that's not what I would recommend. Now, if I say, oh my God, why on earth would you do that? Like, never do that. Like, that's not going to work for me, right? It's not going to work for the client either. It's going to damage this very new budding relationship that I've got. And most importantly, the animal is then not going to get the opportunity to learn an alternative way, or the client won't learn an alternative way to work with their animal, is what I mean. And like I said, my goal is to improve animal welfare. So the best thing I can do is listen to that person, let them say all the things that they've tried, all the things that haven't worked, and then be as honest as I can with them. Do you know what, like, there's some really good information out there on the internet, you know, but sometimes you just need to sift through, and sometimes the videos that have got the most hits might not necessarily be the ones that are going to be most effective in the long term. Have you considered looking at this? How about we talk about this? Can you tell me, you know, what happened when you did this process, and hey, maybe we should try a different strategy, and sort of make it conversational and see if that person is open to trying to change something. Because if I just attack and say, well, that's awful, why on earth would you do that, that's stupid, then they're likely just to shut down, not want to hear anything else that I've got to say, which means that animal doesn't get the benefit of a positive reinforcement training strategy. I don't get to keep working with a new client, or, you know, whatever it is, if it's a college or a zoo, wherever it is. If I go in there and you know, say that everything that they're doing is wrong, then that's probably not really going to build an effective relationship. Relationships are all built on trust. We need to have mutual trust, and that's really important when you're training, whether it's an animal or a human, I think. So yeah, I think that's how I would approach that. I'm trying to build a safe space by listening to people, trying not to criticize what they've already done, giving them the space to explain it to me, and asking them questions about it in a as non-judgmental way as I know how. And I don't always get it right, like I said, but I'll be honest about that. I think honesty sometimes goes a really long way. If somebody, particularly, in a team leader environment, in a team environment, when somebody's made a mistake, I will tell them, I did the same thing as you. Like, 5 years ago, 2 years ago, whatever it was, I did exactly the same thing. This was the outcome when I did it. This is how I changed my behavior so that I didn't do that again. Do you think that strategy would work for you? Or what do you think would work for you? Because obviously everyone's an individual, to quote Susan Friedman there. But, all of our learners are individuals, and we need to treat them as such. So sometimes what worked for me won't work for you, but let me ask you what you think might work to help you not make a mistake again in the future. Sometimes that creates a safe space.
Yeah, it's something I think the listeners of this show can all relate to in terms of listening and the conflict of what one's hearing with the skill and knowledge that they possess. I saw a funny Halloween meme. I might have told you this, Nicky. It was Freddy Krueger or one of those Halloween characters. He had a knife and he was looking for his victim, who was a positive reinforcement trying to hide him behind a wall, and he said, "Positive reinforcement doesn't work." And this guy's like, "Yes, it does." So it can be a challenging thing to do. I think another one of the little tidbits at the end there that I was hearing when you were talking was empathy, and saying to people that you've been in their shoes and that you understand. Is that intentionally? That's what I took away from what you were saying, but I don't know if that's what you were trying to portray, was to share that empathy.
I think sharing empathy and sharing experiences is great as long as they're genuine. So, I don't set out to, oh, I've done exactly the same as you if I haven't, because I think that isn't honest communication. So if I genuinely have left the penguin pool running for 3 hours and flooded the enclosure, which obviously I have, then, that's something that I feel comfortable sharing. Oh, I did this. And then we had to change all of the sand in all of the nest boxes because everybody got flooded out, and I'll explain and share a little bit about that story. But, if it's somebody's seen a YouTube video telling them to dunk their parrot in a bucket of water, they're out there. I'm not going to tell someone that I've done that, because it's disingenuous for me to lie to my client. We're building honesty, or my teammate, or whoever it is. We're trying to build a relationship based around honest, clear communication. And so I will absolutely share mistakes that I've made if I've made similar or the same mistake, and what helped me get through that. But I'm not going to empathize with them just for the sake of empathizing, if that makes sense. I won't compare something they did with something that I didn't really do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it also it nearly feels like the opportunity for empathy in that example is, I've been in a situation where I was at my wit's end and I didn't know what to do. So I went online looking for information, and I had no filter to put what I was receiving through to know if it was good or bad. So I understand where you're coming from in that aspect. But I love that part about authenticity. You had a whole list of things, and we're nearly at the end of this episode. So thank
Sorry
you.
about that.
Thank you for entertaining me and my thoughts. Did you want to add maybe one more thing about one more idea about a trainer who's listened to this show, who might be feeling that doubt? They're like, do I really have what it takes to be a positive reinforcement, to be an impactful positive reinforcement animal trainer and run a successful business, or influence my team, or train the animal that my zoo curator has said, and the behavior they have said that I need to train of this animal, whatever it is that's might be influencing or making you question your skill set and your knowledge. One more thing to help people develop confidence in 2024?
No pressure, just one more thing. Okay. Okay, so something which I actually did a talk a couple of years ago at a conference that I called finding the middle ground. And it's something which I quote quite often, not the talk itself, but like that phrase, find the middle ground. And I certainly didn't coin the phrase. I don't know who did, but it's one that I adopted for the sake of this talk. But what I operationalized that to look like, and what I was trying to get across every time that I use that phrase, is that if we look at everything like it's a training plan, okay, so finding the middle ground, to me, it means you might have this amazing goal, like, you work with 15 baboons, let's say, and you want each one of them to be recall trained individually to their name and to go into a crate as an individual animal, okay? And that might be your, oh my God, wouldn't it be amazing if I could get this behavior for my troop of baboons? Wouldn't that be absolutely incredible? But that that's not achievable right now. Okay, because there's only one of you and you've got 15 baboons and only 3 of them know their names. Okay, so at the moment, you're thinking there is absolutely no way that I can get that behavior. When I talk about finding the middle ground, what I say is write down that behavioral goal, put it over here on your wall with a pin in it. Okay, and then ignore it for now. Look at where you're at and look at what changes you can make right now to get the next step towards where you want to go to. Okay. So that might be, I'm going to teach the other 12 baboons their name. Maybe that's an achievable goal. Maybe instead you want to station train them all. Maybe that's your achievable goal. Maybe you're going to work with just those 3 individuals that know their name and start recall training those 3. It doesn't really matter what next step you take, because that's for you to decide. Whatever you think you're going to be successful at, because remember, we all like to be reinforced. And if you're successful with an animal, you get reinforced, and then you want to start training the next one. But if you take a little tiny step, any step towards your goal, you've got a new start point, because now your start point is, well, out of my 15 baboons, 6 of them know their names and 3 of them are already recall trained to their name, right? So that's now your start point. So you're getting closer to where you want to be, right? So that's a middle ground. That is a step on the way to your goal. That middle ground has to become an approximation. It's not the destination. That's not where you're going to stop. But every single time that you make an approximation and you get slightly further in your training plan, you've got that new start point, which means that you've already come quite far from the beginning when you had baboons that didn't know their names at all and wouldn't come anywhere near you. And I think sometimes it helps us to have an achievable goal, because having 15 baboons all recalled individually to their names and going into a crate, I mean, it sounds phenomenal, but it definitely doesn't sound very achievable right now for one trainer. However, take those little tiny baby steps and get to that middle ground, and then the middle ground becomes your start point, and all of a sudden you're a lot further along. And it might take you a year. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how long it takes you, because you're trying to just do a little bit more than you've currently done. I don't know if I've really explained that as well as I could have done, but that's, like, to me, find that middle ground. Like, don't be put off by the fact that your goal seems insurmountable. Just look at what changes you can make right now in order to get a little tiny bit closer to your goal. And if you treat it like a training plan, a shaping plan, then hopefully everything feels more achievable.
And it makes me think that when we're focusing on that big goal, that we forget, or we lose sight of, or we don't even see all of the approximations that we do on a daily basis, depending on your mindset and what reinforces, or what is reinforcing for you. It might be what didn't work. So you now have more information to make a good decision for that next approximation, but you couldn't have got there without learning. And I love that because it's a really cool way of helping us, I think, remember to celebrate all of the approximations along the way, and not a way that I've heard about before in terms of pinning up that end goal on the wall. Very cool. And I love the idea of just leaving it. Like you've actually just that in itself is an approximation, right? I'm just going to put that up there. I can feel successful because I've done it.
Absolutely. And do you know what? You could revisit it in 3 months and you can go, oh, do you know what? I'm actually a lot closer to that goal. Maybe you can change those goalposts. Maybe you decide that it's even though you've come so far, you're never going to get each baboon individually recalled to its name, but maybe you're going to get a group of 5 of them recalled to one name. These 5 always come together. Okay, well then that's my new goal. Those 5 come together. The other 10 come individually. Great. You're successful. So don't be afraid to change your goalposts if you need to in order to achieve that goal. But yeah, I love the idea of just stick it on the wall, leave it there. It's there. It's not going anywhere. It could still be your dream behavior in 10 years. Even if you can't do it at your current facility, you might move jobs. You might go somewhere else where there's a team of 5 of you working with 15 baboons instead of 1 of you. And maybe your dream can finally become a reality. And if you've got it pinned up on your wall somewhere, you can take it with you and be like, hey guys, wouldn't this be super cool? You know, don't put a timeline on things.
Well, I've really enjoyed all of these lessons, your insights, and learning from your experience. Sadly, though, it does bring us to the end of the episode. Just curious, before we wrap up, though, I love asking everyone this. You've got a unique role with your position on multiple boards and your experience, especially in the UK and having worked in multiple organizations and see how they run. What do you really want to see happen? What is the goal that we should be sticking on our wall for 5 to 10 years from now?
I mean, it's a big question, isn't it, really? I think for me, we all as individuals need to take ownership of deciding to learn more, like we're all learning all the time, and learning how to better apply behavior management and training procedures with our animals. But more importantly, I think that we need to really be focusing on meeting the animal's needs. I know we talked about this a little while ago. We talked about the Freeing the Operant podcast that you did, the episode that you did. But I think that episode is so important because it really talks about if you're giving the animals everything that they could possibly want or need within the habitat that they're living in, whether that's a zoo or your home or a sanctuary, a rescue centre, whatever it is, the less intervention in behaviours that we perceive as problematic will be needed because we're actually meeting the animal's needs. And I don't know if this is like specifically a training question, but you know, the more that we as trainers can be involved in assessing whether or not an animal's needs are being met in its current habitat and environment, and if you're in zoos, can you be more involved in enclosure design? And when people say, oh, what do you need for a training panel in this? You know, we want to do a training session on view to the public. What do you think we need to do that? Absolutely put in your, oh, it'd be great if we had this and this and this and access here and this, but also try and sneak in a few of those things that you know will really help that animal to have their species specific or individual specific needs met within that space, so that we see less of things like stereotype behaviours and less behaviours that are perceived as problematic. I think I've already said that, but you know, and also when we are looking at those behaviours that are perceived as problematic, who are they problematic for? Are they problematic for the public, for the managers, for you as the trainer, or for the animal? Because actually, maybe we need to be redefining what's problematic. And if it's just problematic for, I mean, obviously the public are very important when they're coming into zoos and sanctuaries and things because they're paying to come in and all of that money goes back into reinvesting. But maybe there's a way that you can use interpretation to explain, actually, that's not problematic for the animal. That is a natural behaviour that the animal is engaging in. for X amount of time, and we're really pleased that it's doing that, even if it's sleeping. Let's use that as a great example, because how many members of the public are disappointed that an animal is asleep when they're there visiting it? But perhaps that's on the way that we use our interpretation to explain, well, this animal does sleep for 20 hours of the day. So, actually it'd be more problematic if the animal was up and moving around the enclosure all day long. That's actually very detrimental to this animal's welfare. And I think sometimes if people expect to see an animal doing a thing and it isn't, they can be disappointed. But if you explain to them that actually that is exactly what that animal should be doing for this amount of time, people are often much more comfortable with that. So that's probably on us. And it's more about interpretation and discussions that we have with members of the public, and providing the animal with the feeling of security to be able to engage in those natural behaviours for the amount of time that they should be. I don't know if I answered that.
No, you did, absolutely. I think freeing the operant should be up on everyone's wall as the big end goal for us to find a middle ground for. Just before we do wrap up, though, can you just, I've said that like 3 times now. This is the final time, everyone, I promise. Can you just remind everyone where they can go online to get in touch and find out more?
Absolutely. So my website is www.shapingbehaviour.com. I'm in the UK, so remember to put the U in behaviour. If you're in America, I know you guys spell it differently, but please put the U in, otherwise you won't find me. I have a Facebook page, which is Shaping Behaviour, again with the U. Instagram account, which is at Nicky Shaping Behaviour. Again, it's got the U in there. And Nicky is Nicky. So otherwise you'll find somebody. And I have an email address, which is on my website and my social media, which is just nicky@shapingbehaviour.com. So it's pretty easy to find, really. And I don't have TikTok because, maybe I'm too old for TikTok. Who knows?
Me too. We will link to all of this in the show notes as well. This has been so much fun from myself and on behalf of everyone listening. Nicky, we really appreciate you taking time to come and hang out with us. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Ryan. It's been such an honour to be on the podcast. Thank you so much for inviting me, and happy training to all of the animal training community out there.
And thank you as well so much for listening. This is your host, Ryan Cartledge, signing off from this episode of the Animal Training Academy podcast show. It's our hope today's conversation sparked inspiration and added some tools to your trainer's toolbox. Remember, every training challenge is an approximation towards becoming a better trainer. Embrace the rough patches, learn from them, and keep improving. And don't forget, the path to growing your skills and expanding your knowledge continues beyond this episode. Visit www.atamember.com to join our waitlist and be the first to know when our membership doors open again. There you'll find a supportive community of trainers just like you, working to make a positive difference in the lives of animals and humans alike. Until next time, keep honing your skills, stay resilient, and remember, every interaction with an animal or human learner is your opportunity to create ripples. We're here cheering you on every step of the way. See you at the next episode.